People with diabetes are constantly checking their blood sugar levels to keep them under control. A lapse in control can lead to a coma and even death. If you are diabetic or know somebody who is, you need to know what the warning signs are. Dr. Edna Tokayer of Boca Raton Regional Hospital is here to tell us. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, first off, what is diabetes ketoacidosis and how common is it?
Okay, well, it's not that common, but it's a complication of diabetes, and it sort of starts out that there's an increase in need for insulin or that there's a lack of insulin. So for whatever reason, you don't have as much insulin as you need. And those increase in needs could be from an infection or from trauma or a physical stress like a heart attack or a stroke. And what happens is the whole process starts slowly and then can snowball out of control. And you had mentioned death and coma. Those are definitely possible outcomes. But fortunately, most people go to the hospital, get treated, and do very well afterwards.
And how does it differ from diabetes type 1 and type 2?
Well, it tends to happen more in people with type 1 because they really can't make the insulin that they need. And so if they skip insulin or if they get themselves an infection and that suddenly starts the whole process. So the process starts off where there's an increase in need for insulin and you don't have that insulin. And without the insulin, you're not able to use your sugar as fuel. So your body has to switch to another form of fuel. And sort of like a car can use flex fuel or electric cars. So whatever it needs to run that engine. So sugar is what your body uses to run the engine. If you don't have the ability to use it because you don't have the insulin, then you have to use something like fats. So your body starts to break down fats. The byproduct of fat is then the ketones. So that's where you get the diabetic ketoacidosis. When you burn fat as fuel, you become acidotic. And to get rid of that extra acid, you start to breathe heavy. So people who have diabetes ketoacidosis, when they're really in the midst of it, they're breathing heavy, their heart is racing, they're dehydrated because they've been losing fluids, either because of the infection, diarrhea, diarrhea or vomiting. And so without that extra fluid, now you have a lot of sugar, you're building up, you're breaking down other parts of your body to use fuel, and all that sugar ends up staying in the bloodstream because you don't have the insulin to bring it to where it needs to go. I'm sorry?
And what causes it?
Well, if you have an infection and you have diabetes, now your insulin need is higher. So with that extra insulin need, you may not be meeting those needs. And without that extra insulin that's needed, then you're not able to use the sugar that you have. So you use a different form of fuel, and then you start this whole metabolic derangement.
And if left untreated, what kind of complications can come up?
Well, if left untreated, definitely coma and death is what happens. And before insulin was available, that's what happened to everyone who had diabetes ketoacidosis. Now with insulin, you basically need to go to the hospital and you get a lot of fluids, and you get insulin and also electrolytes to replace.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really fascinating stuff. Boca Raton Regional Hospital sponsors our expert and underwrites our Ask the Doctor segment.